I wanted very much, a lot of your inputs on your choices for Ixigo as leader and founder. Um, would have borne true through this process of the slowdown, because I saw how robust your internal systems were. But at the same time, I don't think business has ever taken such a dramatic hit, particularly for the travel industry, on as in 2020. So two elements of our conversation: one, what really happened through 2020. I know that there is now a rebound, but what are your expectations going out? And I'll talk you through some of those elements. But even more than that, what changed for you organizationally or not? And that's really where I'm hoping I can learn once again, even as I'm expecting that you will Ixigo will apply again for the awards. um,
Sure.
but it would be important for us to be able to understand this, and a great joy for me as chair of jury.
Absolutely. So I think, Radha, this was 1 year that nobody had prepared for.
Mhm.
And I think, the only thing that probably would have saved us was because we did have some prior experience of going through such crises. In our story, we've gone through at least four of these. Um, at least one of them in the past has also been because of externalities, which was 2008-9. We survived the whole Lehman Brothers crisis, even though our Series A term sheet collapsed, and we were kind of left in the lurch with very little cash. But I think we applied some of those learnings as we saw this crisis coming. And one of the things we knew from day one when we saw this coming in March was that this is going to be different, because it was more of a humanitarian crisis, right?
Yeah.
It's not one of those economic crises that you have a slowdown and it's going to bounce back, but it was more about real threat to lives and safety of our employees, of our customers. Because these stakeholders, we were very worried about, like, people who had bookings for international destinations, for example, like the first week of March, then when it started looking like this whole thing is going to spread everywhere in the world. The first thing we did was we looked at all our international flight bookings, and we were like, these people are all at risk, right? And if I were them, if it was my family member, like, I would just cancel my trip and expect a full refund, right? Because you wouldn't want to travel with so much uncertainty around whether a country has COVID cases or not and whatnot. So that was one of the first thoughts that came to our mind. And the second was, look, health and safety of the employee is very important. I think we were one of the first few companies in Gurgaon that just said, look, we are already prepared, because we already had some kind of work from home policy where people could do like a couple of work from homes in a month. So we said, look, we can actually theoretically work from home if we all want to. So I think it was 5th or 6th of March, 2020, when we announced everybody needs to work from home from that day on. This was like 2 days after the first case at, I think it was a Paytm employee or something like that, I recall, in Gurgaon, right? So we kind of huddled and took a quick decision on that, saying, look, we'll take other decisions later, but first thing, लोगों से बोलते हैं, let's work from home from the next day itself. And I think, in hindsight, it's good that we reacted fast, because we didn't really have, at least in the first couple of months, any COVID cases because of people needing to travel to office or something, right? So, and then of course, end of March, we went into lockdown nationwide. We could see that coming too, like a week before the lockdown. It started seem like it's going to happen, especially with this Janta curfew and all. We knew that was more of a practice session. So I think we were mentally prepared that, look, travel is going to go away for a few months. But fiscally, we were not very well prepared, because it's not like we had very huge cash reserves. So we would have to react and take measures to ensure longevity of the business for at least 12 months, right? I mean, one can always plan beyond that, but then we were like, worst case, if there's a 6-month lockdown, are we going to survive, right? And the answer was, even to do that, we would have to take some cost cutting measures right now. So very quickly we went into a huddle with our leadership team saying, okay, what do we do from here? And there were multiple options discussed, including whether we should let people go, whether we should, give people what you call work without pay, kind of, for a few months, furlough they call it, right? Or we find a solution like we did back in 2008, where we said, look, if everybody sort of sacrifices a bit, then the company actually survives without losing people, right? And Rajneesh and I, our intuition said that the last option would be the best for this crisis, because the worst thing we wanted was that an Ixigo is out of work, is doesn't know anything about the future, so uncertain future, and their health and safety of themselves and their family members is also at risk. So financial security is gone, health wise they feel vulnerable, and they are sitting at home, which is already psychologically depressing, right? At least it was in the early days. But we said, look, irrespective of the opinion in the room, and there were a couple of people in the leadership team who kind of said that maybe we should let some people go this time. It's going to be very long term, travel is in the middle of it. But we were like, no, we can always find a solution that doesn't involve that. And back then, I mean, now in hindsight, we were proven right. But if the lockdown had lasted for 6 months, we would be proven wrong, and maybe we would have to take those drastic measures. But we just took a punt saying, look, in all practicality, if 6 months there's no business activity, then all sectors are going to suffer, right? I mean, it's not just us. And if we have to, in the worst case, let people go, then people will understand why we did that, right? Because it would just be madness for all sectors, not just travel. So we said, let's take a median case assumption. Let's say 3-4 months lockdown. Can we survive that with, lower salaries? And we found a formula that worked. We spoke to employees and they seemed receptive. And we did this all hands meeting, which I've now very well documented in a Medium article, which we can send you that. But basically, we just came clean and very transparent with with the team, saying that, look, these were the choices we faced, and this is an unprecedented crisis. Next 6 months, maybe next 12 months are going to be hard. So, you got to be prepared for a very long, so I almost actually read out the speech that Winston Churchill gave at the time Britain was going to war, right? Because that's what it was. We said, this is a war, right? And it's a war against COVID, and we don't know how long it will last. There will be, bodies, and there'll be like a lot of damage, economic damage, etc. And we all need to face this. And I think this was like just around the time the country was going into lockdown, or maybe the first week of the lockdown when we did this. Arshin would remember the date when we did that, but probably end of March. Um, and I think it was quite an emotional moment. But the best part was, as we were speaking, as we were talking through our thinking, and I was almost in tears, because I was conveying the news that most of you are going to have a salary cut between whatever 40% to 60%. For the leadership team, it was even higher than that, for a few months, and I wouldn't know when it would come back. All I could say was, look, the moment we are in a better shape, we will try to make up for it. And we got tons of messages of support in the chat of this thing, on Google Meet. Almost everyone was kind of saying, don't worry, we'll make it through, and we are all in this together, all of that. So it was a very emotional moment. And it was great to see that the team was rallying in our support. The best part, we didn't have to ask anyone to leave, and that's what kind of enthused the whole team towards saying, okay, we are all in this together. Let's figure out a way to survive. And I think everyone sort of took it upon themselves to go into that mode where we said, look, if there are any costs we can squeeze out from the system, if there are ways to continue making some revenue even though the bookings have stopped, let's go and find those ways. And people came up with ingenious things. And the other thing that was happening was, look, like I said, on the customer side, right, people had to cancel these trips and they were looking for refunds. The international airlines were non-committal on refunds, right? They were like, we'll let you know, because at that time there was no clarity on rules, and there was no Supreme Court ruling or anything of that sort. And And we said, look, these are people who spend maybe sometimes a lakh or whatever, and a lot of money stuck there. It's not humanly possible for them to travel in the lockdown, and the airlines would have to refund at some point. So we actually were the first OTA who took a very proactive call at that time and said that, look, if you're traveling to any of these top 8 COVID impacted countries, we'll give you a full refund. Now, whether we get it from the airline or not is secondary, because it's inhuman to expect you to travel, right? I mean, it's kind of stupid that traveling to China or US or Hong Kong or the top 8 countries which were already COVID infected at that point. In fact, TY published this the day we announced it, because we were probably the only OTA taking such a hard call. But we said, look, even if it's like 1 crore rupees at stake or whatever it was, it's the reputation as well as the kind of approach towards saving customers' lives is more important at this point, right? And the other thing that happened was there was a huge pile of refunds that started to come in as like requests for refunds that started to come in once the lockdown happened for domestic flights. Now, in the travel business, typically how it works is like, if I'm collecting 1 crore of cash today, typically the refunds will not be more than 5-7 lakhs, because it's not a large percentage of trips that actually get cancelled, right? Now here it was the opposite. I was not making any revenue, and suddenly there were a lot of refund requests coming in, to the extent that the payment gateway accounts that we use started they were in deficit, right? Because we need to fund those accounts to refund the customer. Now one particular weekend, we ran out of money in those accounts, and you couldn't fund it on a weekend because you can't. In those days, NEFT and RTGS did not work over the weekend. Now it does. And so we said, look, there's a 40 lakh or something shortage. What do we do about it? It's incredible, but almost 40 of our employees, I think close to 34-35 employees, if not 40, came together and we funded that account. Right? And like within a matter of hours, like we put up a Google sheet, and soon it was full with names saying, I've transferred 1 lakh, I've transferred 2 lakhs, I've transferred 50,000. Whoever could do that, they just funded it in, and we returned it on, obviously, on Monday, the moment we collected the money from the gateways. But so we had these moments where the team came together, like customer support, for example, right? So we were getting 7 to 8 times, sometimes 10 times the number of calls that we would typically get pre-COVID, right? Because people were anxious about, do we get a refund? Do we get reschedule? Credit shell hai kya? Just picking up the phone was a challenge because we didn't have enough people, or even responding to their emails or chats. So we had all hands on deck. There were a lot of people from non-customer support functions, even HR, and even Arshi and I remember, and maybe even Nupur were, sitting on chat and email for like several days all together, trying to solve for customer queries, all hands on deck approach.
You said 2008-9 learnings helped you. What were those learnings? And juxtapose new learnings of 2020 with that. What were the old learnings that helped you tide through this?
Sure.
The top 2 or 3 that stand out.
Yeah.
And now, what's the big new learnings that you've taken?
Sure. So I think the one big learning both from then and which also worked here is, like, be as transparent as you can with the team, right? And bad news needs to travel faster than even good news, right? So everybody likes talking about good things and boasting about new achievements in every town hall, but the reality is that as founders, our responsibility is also to ensure that people know things like they are, right? And if things are going to look bad, and actually at that time some people thought we were being overly prophetic about it, but we could see it coming. Like, we could see that it's going to be really hard for the next 6 to 12 months, right? Not, this is not going to be a 1-2 month crisis. And so we just told people like it was, and we said, look, we had 2 choices. Like, we could have let go a lot of people, or we could have, everybody takes a salary cut and we all survive this together. And we've chosen the second option because this is a humanitarian crisis. So I think that's the difference. In the first instance was that we were raw, like we were 2 years into our business, and the idea actually came from one of our employees back then, who said that, look, and because we had almost taken a decision to let go people, and last time, right, in 2008-9, and one of our young engineers said that, look, why do we need to let go people? We can work without salary. I mean, he said that literally. I was like, you're crazy, because you have rent to pay and you have other things to take care of. I think in both instances, what was common was that there was unanimous support for the decision within the team. And you know and the fact is that everybody sort of came together to solve the problem, and make sure that everyone took care of each other, and that we were transparent, and that we were very upfront about it. So we were not pretending there is no problem, etc. What was different is that was a financial crisis that kind of has its own cycle to resolve itself, whereas this was a humanitarian crisis, right? So we had to look at it through the humanitarian lens as well, which means, are we taking care of all the people, right? Are we being empathetic first, and then the other things come later? But in this case, you had to deal with a little more empathy, and worry about their health and safety first, right? So I think that's what was different here.
How have you shifted your lens? Have you shifted your lens in what you expect from them, or was your culture already so empathy driven, that the balance between go getter and keep a company together, the two kinds of leadership qualities, did you find those, were there new surprises in how different people chose to lead, and has that shifted your lens on what you look for in your leaders?
Yeah, I think, look, fundamentally, the big difference in this new way of working is, on the variable of trust, right? Which is, look, people in, pre-COVID would not imagine like their entire company could work from home, because this whole notion of clocking in time and, um, being able to be there, so to say, in the physical sense of be there. It mattered a lot in the psyche for many leaders or middle managers, right? And even if explicitly the culture would not, let's say, reward or punish those attributes, but I think just culturally, as in uh, as in how people build their biases, how their opinions get shaped. These things did have value, right? Whether someone showed up on time, whether he was sitting on his seat at, and so I think the biggest barrier that got broken here was that, look, you can trust that people are working from home, even if you can't see them on their seat all the time, right? And as long as you set the right metrics and expectations. So I think the onus of this entire OKR or KRAs, KPIs, like making sure that people know what they are chasing, right? Given that you can't micromanage them in a physical way anymore, right? It's important that you just give them very clear direction, give them the clear KPIs they are chasing, and do very frequent check-ins with them to tell them whether they are, going off track, right? Because I think that's all that is needed. But not every leader or every manager is attuned to this way of working, right? Doing frequent check-ins with team members. And because some people would just assume, hey, I'm sitting here with the team, and and I talk to them every day, so they know what to do, and everybody knows their OKRs. But that now, that approach doesn't work. You have to constantly remind them, what we are chasing, what we are out to build, and make sure that you get feedback. I mean, check-ins are not just about the leader or a manager giving feedback, but it's also about the employee giving feedback to their manager and leader on what they expect and it's not being met. So I think having that two-way communication being made more proactive, and just ensuring that it's happening,
Yeah,
that itself is a good starting point. And to be honest, I mean, most organizations, I mean, including us, we struggled with it in the first few months, because you would just assume that things would be managed in the same way as they were being managed earlier. But then you realize that communication starts to break down once people are not clearly told or reminded every time of what their manager expects from them,
yeah,
right? So
yeah.
And usually you discover these disconnects, once you have a review discussion, or like a end of the year appraisal discussion. But here, because also there's no informal chit chat happening, because sometimes that feedback also goes in casual lunch and dinner chats, right? Where you can tell him ki yaar ye cheez tu dekh liya kar, अच्छे से नहीं हो रहा है, right? That kind of thing. But now even those opportunities are few. So you would rather have a one-on-one 1 hour, set up every fortnight or every month with your teammate, and have that, just, it's not about discussing work, but more about discussing how we are working, and what my expectation with you were versus what's happening right now, right?
Yeah.
And vice versa. So I think I think that's critical in my view now, in this new way of working, to enforce throughout the team, right from the team leader level to the top leadership level.
Mm.
Everybody needs to just be more conscious of feedback, constant feedback that needs to flow in the system. Uh, because I think the usual channels how those feedbacks used to get delivered, some of them are broken now. So there's no, for example, there's no physical cue. Sometimes you would say कि
Yes.
आज boss का mood ठीक नहीं है,
Body
right?
language.
How would you say that? Because you would see how the boss is behaving in the office, and you would adjust to that, right? But यहाँ पे you can't see that, you can't feel that, right? So you have to know it in an actual one-on-one conversation, right?
There are two elements that could replace permanent teams that are already doing so, and in your kind of business, which has fairly, one is this whole gig. Now that you have access globally to expertise and talent, and as you grow from mid-size to large, what is your perspective? Because suddenly technically everybody has functioned like a gig worker tied into a whole. And so, what are your expectations of that gig economy and your being able to tap into it? What's the plus and minus of it and the quantification? And the second question is really around AI. But first, this one.
Right. So, look, I think Nupur hinted at this, but the point is that talent can now flow between geographies more easily, because that mental barrier of having an office or
Yeah.
permanent location at one place, that has gone away. Which means that actually we've been interviewing a lot more people, let's say from Bangalore or from other locations within India.
Yes.
We haven't yet thought about outside India, because there are other, like, time zone and other issues that one has to sort out before you move into that way of working. But theoretically, it does allow you to think of that future for yourself at some point, where you could even hire the best person for that job
Yeah.
from Eastern Europe or from some other place in the world, right? And I think whether the organizations are able to tap into this and leverage this will mean, whether they can transform themselves into being more remote and more hybrid over time. I am one of the believers that we get overly biased by what's going on at a particular point of time when we make these decisions. And you would see a lot of people said we will go full remote, but you take the same survey from those people right now. In fact, I personally surveyed like more than 60 startup founders, growth stage company founders. Arshin can share the findings with you
Yes.
on how many of them actually want to stay remote versus go back to office. And 58% of them said we are going to go back to office as soon as everything is better, right? The same survey, if I did it back in May or June, people might have been overly optimistic about work from home, right? Because you go through that, the usual, right? There's this initial resistance, then you have, adoption, people like it, and then there's this disillusionment, right? Right, this is all just like this Gartner hype cycle. So you go through this slope of disillusionment, you're down, and now you're going through this slope of enlightenment, where you're saying that, look, there is a middle path, right? There is a middle path where you can have, for certain parts of your team, you could have fully remote workers, and without changing anybody's life. For other functions, you could have a more lenient work from home, or a policy where you don't really clock hours anymore, and you let people decide whether they want to come to office or not, even
Yeah.
when you resume office, right? And I think that's what most organizations that I speak to, like they're either moving fully back to office or they will have some kind of hybrid. Only 3% of the people in that survey said they will be fully remote and they've given up their office forever. Because, this whole disillusionment with not being able to preserve, culture the way you want to, and not being able to get the touch and feel side into the equation, not being able to tap into the creative talents of people
Yeah.
because of no informal chit chat. I think that's a frustration for companies like us. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I understand. Even before this, I remember a couple of years ago, I was uh, in a conversation with the global chief operating officer of IBM.
Mhm.
And he was talking about how they actually opted, they sort of pioneered this remote and all that, and he said, we're going back to campuses and back to, because we just don't think it's going to replicate. It'll be interesting to talk to him again, but he was exactly of the view that you can't replicate the culture. And I think it's even more relevant in India because we are that sort of people. We are people
Yeah.
that engage. We are people that still live in large, boisterous, often unhappy, often crazy, overjoyed, whatever families. Now everything is big in our sort of emotional states. So we'll have to wait to see. So I got it. So you will have access, but to those, and you're keen to explore those. And I think in many ways, then the experience of the last few months probably enables companies better to be able to absorb these experts, etc. The acceptance even internally will be a lot more because people have seen the what it's like on that side, isn't it? Even
Yeah, I
teams.
think
Mm,
I think the mental barriers for adoption are gone, at least for
yeah,
remote
yeah,
work.
yeah,
So it does open the possibility. I mean, now it's not a crazy thought to hire some expert sitting in Czechoslovakia. If he's the
that's
only guy,
that's
who's good
that's
at
correct.
what you do. I think whether companies are able to leverage that will require a sea change in the thought on the leadership side. On it's possible, but whether you do it or not will depend on whether you're able to take that leap of faith.
Yeah,
uh, that's what I'm talking about, and maybe many of us are still not where we're gonna take a very large leap of faith on remote to the extent where we say, hey, I'm gonna hire anyone from wherever they are because that's my future. Because it's very hard to put a needle on what that future for us really looks like. I mean, maybe in June we'll have a better conversation on this.
yeah, yeah, well said. Now tell me about the whole AI, robotics, etc., etc. What is your thinking, your and OTA? Your life is based on the quality of your technology and how it is able to interface with customers. What is your view on how this is, how do you intend to use it? You will already be using it, but what is the way forward on that score?
Yeah, so
What
there
value is
also,
cutting it?
absolutely. So there also, rather, the adoption has actually accelerated due to
Yes,
COVID.
yes,
Um, we had this tool called Tara, right, which is basically an AI bot that handles our customer queries, right, both on chat as well as on email, and then now we're also testing it on voice. But Tara was developed, in 2017, 18, launched end of 18 and perfected through 19. Early 2020, just before COVID, we actually released a new and improved version of it just in the nick of time, because during the COVID crisis, Tara was handling, in some cases, up to 90% of the queries that were coming in on chat, right? Which means we didn't have to deploy like 500 people to handle all those queries. We could manage with just 40, 50 people, instead of having to spend that much on customer service, and yet deliver a much better, a more prompt, almost instant kind of customer service experience for the most common queries. So what we did is that we've automated the most common queries that one can have related to flight or train travel, and whether it's booking related or information related. And it understands context, it understands your past experiences. So if you had a query 3 weeks ago and you're coming back for the same query, you don't need to describe everything again to Tara, right? So we built a lot of empathy as well in it. So we have a team that works on the content that Tara, how it communicates with an end user, and we have some empathetic statements in there to make it feel more human like. So we've spent a lot of time in perfecting that. And then we also use the power of data and AI to offer better solutions that are more suited for COVID times. And I'll give you another example. We launched this product called Ixigo Assured, and we built this during the lockdown, right? So the biggest problem, like I told you, was about uncertainty and refunds, etc. Our bet was that as things open up, that uncertainty in people's mind will remain, and people will be very anxious about whether they should book or not at all, because what if that other city goes into lockdown, or if there's an increase in cases, and then the money gets stuck again with the airline, right? So we built this product along with an insurance partner using a lot of past historical data we had. And basically what it does is that it gives you a full refund no matter what reason you choose for cancellation, right? So you could just cancel because you changed your mind, but we will give you a full refund up to $5,000 on every ticket, right? At a price point which was just $399, at the starting price point of $399. So uh, coming up with this product required a lot of data mining and the right pricing, etc. And it's actually an AI product that now we've launched also on trains. Ixigo Assured is also live now on train bookings as of last week. So you could book a train and then cancel, like up to the time the chart gets prepared, and still get your entire money back, no matter what IRCTC decides to, deduct, because we will bear that difference. So again, a product which customers are really appreciating, and built on AI.
What is your expectation, Alok? What at this moment? When do you expect business as usual to return? Will revenge travel, etc., etc., that surge will come? Maybe it's already here. When will things stabilize for you? Because you are a very good proxy for the rest of the economy as well, from a
Sure.
consumer's confidence standpoint.
Sure. So I think it's the recovery has already started. In trains, for example, we are already reserved train travel in India is already at pre-COVID levels, or slightly above pre-COVID levels at the aggregate level, and so is Ixigo, right? And then on flights, I think the market is getting close to 70% now, in terms of 65 to 70% of pre-COVID. Uh, at Ixigo, we are approaching pre-COVID levels there as well. So on various verticals, I think the demand has started to come back to. I wouldn't say it's BAU yet, because what we see is still a lot of VFR, visiting friends and relatives kind of travel, as well as a lot of like utility or urgent. I think a lot of SME business trips have started again, even though the large corporates are kind of using Zoom and not sending their employees here and there yet. But I think this recovery for travel will not be as most people expected, that there'll be a great travel bounce back and suddenly one particular month there'll be like 2x the number of people traveling. I think we have to get used to living with COVID. It's not going to go away. We all just, I know that all of us have this, ideal dream about one fine day, everything will be back to normal. But I think that back to normal will be very gradual and graded. It's not going to be overnight. It's not going to be over a month or two, though I wish it would. It's probably going to take till the end of the year for things to start assembling anything close to normalcy about when we think of travel. But what the good news is that there are increasing cohorts of people who are willing to say, okay, if this is the new normal, I'm willing to embrace the new normal, and with safety precautions, go and take a break, take a vacation. Goa was full in December, Maldives is full in January. We all know that. So there is an increasing number of young people, and young people obviously are the least vulnerable in this crisis, right? I think, who have started to go out and not give up their entire dreams for a longer period than they already have. But I think international travel will take longest to come back, because borders will not open up overnight. It will be a gradual process. Half of the borders might still remain shut, even if some of them open. So yeah, I think it's a long road to recovery, to be honest. But domestic is bouncing back faster than what anybody could expect. That's for sure.
If I were to ask you to define what for you, the team at People Strong that I like very much coined this thing called the new code of work. And so if I were to ask you for the top 3 or 4 words that pop into your head when you think new code of work, in light not just of this experience, but in light of being the the super down to earth, super focused entrepreneur that you are, what comes to mind?
I think number one will be empathy.
Mm.
And like I said, even more important in the work from home
Yeah,
environment. The second would be trust, right?
yeah,
And the third would be connected, right?
yeah.